So it's my pleasure to moderate this session today about affordable and secure energy for a competitive Europe. So in the energy context, affordability and security is an evolving concept as we witnessed, the last week. And it again has a very strong geopolitical component. So this political cycle started with very ambitious measures and included those listed in the Affordable Energy Plan, and now its implementation is on its way. So the core political message was to lower energy prices and especially to provide some breathing space for industries and households. And also, some recent proposals and debates by some member states open the floor for some unorthodox deliberations again. So we have fantastic panelists with us today, and I would welcome them to join me on this stage. First, Tom House, Advisor Green Transition and Market Regulation, DG ENER, European Commission. Tom, great to see you again. Thanks for joining us. We have with us Hélène de Vocht, Head of EU Representation, European Energy Exchange. Hélène, please welcome. Corinna Grajetzky, Director of European Affairs, NG. Please, you're welcome. I know, Corinna, you need to leave a bit earlier, so just don't hesitate in case. And last but not least, Sandro Starita, Director of Sustainability, European Aluminium. Please. Okay, so we have the full panel and we are ready to start. I will start with a very broad, very general question. I will ask our panelists just to provide a few key messages, key remarks. And my question will be very broad. What are the measures taken, are good, which are missing? So what is missing, what has been done well to deliver what we call secure and affordable energy, and what exactly what is affordable energy these days for you? So Tom, I will start with you. Maybe you can give us a short recap of what has been done by the Commission during this year and where we stand.
Sure, I mean, that's all. Yes. The first answer to your question is, are all the measures that have come forward from the Commission good? The answer is yes. But yes, from the beginning of the von der Leyen Commission, we've had the idea that competitiveness should be at the heart of what's driving European policy as priority. And within the framework of that, the Clean Industrial Deal, which put the focus on achieving competitiveness and decarbonization. The key energy element of that was the Affordable Energy Action Plan. A lot of you are familiar with that, I guess. And that set the framework of how we're trying to explain that we don't have cheap gas. We don't have Russian pipeline gas anymore. We don't even have cheap LNG. We've got access to LNG, but it's not the cheap energy we wanted. So we have to look for measures that aren't available. We don't have the US regime. We don't have the Chinese regime. We've got to work with what we've got. And for us in the Commission, that means looking at every element of the chain of the energy sector and making sure it's working as efficiently as possible. So when it comes to the energy market, we have an internal market. It's relatively well integrated, but there's more to be done in terms of integration of the market and making the market work better. When it comes to the penetration of renewables, we know we need a much more flexibility in the electricity market. So we've got a range of measures that are meant to be increasing access to storage and demand response and making the whole market more flexible, which brings down price spikes, reduces volatility overall, and delivers us with better, calmer, longer-term prices. With electricity market design, we're looking at the way the market's working. We wanted, everyone agreed, we needed to give longer-term price signals. So we've been trying to boost the market for power purchase agreements. We've been improving the clarity around contracts for difference and improving hedging possibilities and arrangements, including cross-border hedging. So those were longer-term measures to complement a more stable short-term price. And then, of course, there's everything that surrounds the market. One aspect is grids. And again, you're all familiar, I dare say, with the grids package which has come out, which is our latest effort to clarify that whilst the degree of European grid integration is pretty robust, And fundamentally, we have the most integrated and reliable grid in the world, literally. But it can be improved, both in terms of the way it's operated and the way it's planned. So the grids package makes some proposals to improve the planning arrangements to give a stronger European dimension. It picks up the permitting arrangements. We already picked up how permitting works for renewables projects, and that's, we think, been working well where it's been implemented. So we want to extend that kind of fast-tracking, simpler regime to infrastructure as well. And in terms of boosting the role of interconnections, which is, for us, it's always in European dimension to our view, is the need to have greater interconnectivity. So there we're looking at the cost-benefit sharing arrangements to try to see if we can do more to appropriately distribute the costs and benefits so that there's a broader political interest in making those investments in interconnections. So there's what we're doing to improve the way the market works and flexibility, what we do to the way the grid works, and then there's the other dimensions in the energy price, which is the taxation regime. Not entirely a European issue, but we are making recommendations to member states about what they can do to bring down taxes to release energy prices. And again, back on the grids, there's the tariff issue, how tariffs are set, what costs they're covering, what incentives they send. So we've launched a whole process of network tariff reform. So we're looking across each element of the energy sector to see what we can do to help bring those costs down. And then yesterday we had the launch of the Industrial Accelerator Act, which was mentioned. There we're looking upstream to see that the technologies that we're using to bring down these costs, whether it's the rollout of renewables and the supply chains of renewables technologies, or the grids themselves and the supply chains, we're looking there at trying to strike the right balance between getting things done as fast and as cheaply as possible, and onshoring some of that capacity so we're generally more resilient in the face of the kinds of geopolitical shocks that we've been facing. So from the Commission's perspective, that's the view that along the whole energy supply chain and market and grid, we're trying to make things work better. That's how we're bringing down system costs, which should feed through into lower prices. That's our story, and I'll be happy to hear if that's credible or missing anything.
Well, thank you, Tom. We will ask our panelists and the audience for their reactions. I have a few follow-up questions about flexibility, market design, and grids package, but then let's keep it for discussion. So, Elaine, lack of long-term hedging was one of the most debated issues during the energy crisis a few years ago. So what is your views on the current state of longer-term markets, on forward markets?
Yeah, thanks a lot for the question, and I'm very happy to be here. For those who don't know EEX, maybe a very short explanation. So EEX is an energy exchange, the European Energy Exchange. We operate short-term and long-term energy markets. So predominantly the European long-term electricity markets, and we're also the common auction platform for the EU ETS. So I think markets were already mentioned several times. So that's of course where our core expertise lies, and also always the perspective from where we are starting in having this discussion about how can markets become more affordable, how do we integrate more renewables, and all of this. You're completely right. I mean, I think during the energy crisis, but also still now, there's a lot of focus on long-term prices, on stability. Often cases, it's PPAs and CFDs that are mentioned, rightly so. I think both of them can be useful instruments depending on their design. But we always try to highlight it's important not to forget the existing long-term markets, because in the end, public funding is scarce. I mean, price is already high for the industry, but also public funding is not unlimited. So it's important that this is invested really where there is no solution yet that's coming from the markets and where it can be most used. So that's also one of the things we're looking at. When you asked about the functioning of the energy markets, I mean, is also very much linked to the current discussions on security of supply. From our perspective, I mean, the energy markets, both on the short term and the long term, are really reacting exactly and working exactly as they should. They're creating the transparent prices across the different time frames. They ensure the security of supply at all times, both on the electricity and on the gas markets. So on the forwards markets, we've seen quite some trends in the past few years, which from my perspective are really kind of a success story as well that can be highlighted. First is there's really a strong increase in liquidity throughout the whole of Europe, and of course throughout a number of benchmarks. We've also seen that whenever there's increased stress on the markets, there's really quite a shift from bilateral trading to trading on exchanges, because their prices are transparent, counterparty risks are managed. So that's a strong strength that we see, and we also saw again this week. Another trend quite encouraging is the diversification of market participants. We get more and more renewable producers, but also flexibility providers who want to access short-term markets, but also the long-term markets. So we are also continuously developing products to accommodate their needs, to accommodate their integration in the markets, and make sure that also they can manage their price risk in the long term. And then finally, because of course, whilst these things are going very well, and I call it a success story, doesn't mean nothing can be improved. Of course, I think one of the things when we're talking about the market is integration. So we do have a strong European market, but the markets also very much depend on the physical realities. The markets will follow physical realities, will follow where the bottlenecks are. So whenever there's not enough physical reality or physical availability for electricity to flow across borders, there will also not be a harmonization of prices across borders. So that is something that we keep highlighting as well. The market can do a lot, but it cannot precede what is the physical reality. So that's something there. And then maybe the very final thing I wanted to say is to start with is long-term certainty. I think there's a lot of discussions where we will definitely get into about intervention, about market design, about changing. Then again, from my perspective, the worst we can do now is get distracted. From the topics that we've already agreed that we would implement about the integration of renewables, about strengthening long-term markets. So we're really kind of cautious against artificial intervention in prices, but also in market design. Topics like virtual hubs and the merit order were really those things create the volatility, which I think is exactly what the minister tried to avoid. So I think I will end the hub there. But
Perfect. And of course, I will have these questions about the market design a bit later. Just maybe a follow-up question, Ellen. Do I understand correctly that the longer term products are like the maximum duration is usually not more than 2 years? And do we need like longer products, or is it like the right description?
So there's a difference between products being available and the products being very liquid. So it's true the liquidity in long-term markets is mostly concentrated in the first 2 or 3 years. However, products exist across Europe, trading up to 10 years in advance. And we're looking at how to increase them even further. And it's exactly these long-term products that are increasing more and more demand from, for example, PPA signers, so entities who sign the PPA who are then also kind of hedging their price and counterparty risks on our exchanges. So it's indeed the first 2-3 years are the very liquid kind of benchmark products. But up to 10 years, we see more and more activity, especially from these low actors on the market. So there we go.
Thank you. Later for the discussion, I will be curious to ask you about how you see the correlation with like CFDs, PPAs, how all this like is getting out the market. But let's move to Corinna. So what do you see as like missing, perhaps successful measures implemented so far at what like your company is doing at this point, what your company sees as like a positive, perhaps, but at society?
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. So I'm European Affairs Director for ENGIE, and if you live in Belgium, you will know ENGIE because you might be a client. If you don't, we are an integrated utility present in around about 10 European countries and 20 outside the EU. And we believe in a holistic view of the energy system. We believe in the alliance of electrons and molecules. That is something I would like to share. But clearly, we also have a very strong focus on electricity. We just announced last week the acquisition of electricity DSO in the UK. We are super happy about it. It's quite a historic move for us. And our C is currently vice president of Eurelectric. So very, very happy to really have this discussion on affordability from the electricity point of view. And affordability is obviously a big, maybe even philosophical question, what that is. And that is up to our clients in the end to define what it is for them. But we take this discussion extremely serious because we are first in line. My colleagues are telling me that our call centers are overwhelmed these days by calls from clients that are very worried about the geopolitical situation and the increase in their bills. We can luckily say at the moment that it's better, obviously, what's happening, but it's not yet at least a reason to panic. And we are much better off than in 2022. And I think that is important to say because that is exactly what I wanted to echo with Ellen, is that there is no need to question the fundamentals of the eternal energy market and the carbon market that we have. On the contrary, it's extremely important. And I want to start with that. On the positive, we can go to the what is missing, but what is good? What is good is our integrated internal energy market. And most of you will know this famous number of Acer, that 34 billion euros annual benefits annually are contributed to this integrated market. So let's have that in mind, that it has created great benefits. If Acer would reconduct a study, maybe the benefits would be even higher right now because we have made a lot of effort in the last few years to further integrate the market, as Tom said. And then, of course, we have this discussion about industrial competitiveness. And I think it was very, very right what the European Commission did in saying we go from the Green Deal, that we always fully supported, obviously, but we go to a clean industrial deal because we can reconcile decarbonization efforts, climate protection with industrial competitiveness. One is not excluding the other. It can go together, and it can go together with affordability. So really what is good is our electricity market design as it is, with exactly what we said already. The new element after the last reform was a lot of focus on long-term contracts, long-term instruments, PPAs and CFDs, two-sided CFDs to make it fair, that there's also, if there's more earning, we pay back. This is a very fair principle that needs to be implemented. It's not the case. It's not that we have implemented this reform already. So that needs to be implemented in all the member states. And then we have the EU ETS, which is the cornerstone of European climate policy. Here again, and Ellen will certainly be able to add on that and certainly confirm that this is a very well functioning market. It's just very effective. And of course, here again, we take very serious, and I look at Sandro because he will tell us more about it, what our industrial clients say about that. And obviously, electricity costs, energy costs, and CO2 costs are a big issue. But we believe that we can find targeted solutions for targeted problems. We don't have to throw away the baby with the bath. We can look at targeted solutions, and we as ENGIE and as the whole power sector, I think we are very open to look together with our industrial clients into solutions. There are mechanisms. We have the new state aid framework that opens already some ways. We can certainly improve that. It's quite constringent, and we can discuss about it later on. But there are ways to tackle the problems. Tom already mentioned taxes, levies. There are certainly ways, and I'm convinced we can solve this problem and protect where we want to go with decarbonization and further market integration.
Thank you, Corinna. Very good notes. And perhaps just to wrap up about gas prices, of course, the developments are extremely worrying, and it's still unclear how these geopolitical developments will unfold in upcoming weeks, and the duration of the conflict and the duration of Qatar shutting down the production is also like a huge factor. But to the extent like we are here now, like we are not there yet. We are still a pretty good situation. So industrial competitiveness and Sandro, well, energy intensive industries are in the spotlight now. What do you need? What is missing? And what does affordable energy prices mean for you, for your industry sector?
Okay, so thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. A couple of words about the aluminum industry, just to set the scene. So, Ralph, in his introduction, was mentioning solar panels, mentioning electric transports, electric cars, and all these applications, including the expansion of grids, would need aluminum. So there will be no energy transition without we. And the demand will grow, so it's a sector that's looking at the future, but at the same time is subject to a fierce global competition. Many of you may know that the London Metals Exchange is setting the reference selling price for aluminum at global level. So the competition is based on the cost structure, and electricity is up to 40% of the production cost for a primary smelter. So it means that the energy prices and electricity prices are a key element of their competitiveness of the sector. And just a couple of numbers, a primary smelter is consuming in the order of terawatt hours per year of electricity base load 24/7. So it means that it needs secure supply, not in the short term, but in the very long term. And the smelter can live for decades, many decades. So what we are talking about in terms of long-term contracts for us means decades. And the visibility of the price over these decades is very important. European smelters are also characterized by a carbon footprint which is less than half of the global average. It means that boosting the European production of primary aluminium is also a safe bet in terms of climate perspective. So instead of receiving imports from outside of Europe with higher carbon footprint, we can improve and increase the production in at European level. Another dimension is that for the segments of the value chain that are not electrified at the moment, but to rely on natural gas for their needs, electrification is the best option for the decarbonization. So also in this case, the visibility and the affordability of electricity is crucial. So I'm not able to give you a number of what is affordable energy, but it's clear that in a global context, any euro that you pay more is detrimental to your competitiveness. And at the moment, European smelters suffer prices which are 2 to 4 times higher than the competitors in the US or in China. So it's clear that there will not be a single solution, a silver bullet that will say, okay, that just put in place this system and that will help. But there's a number of things that can be put in place. It was mentioned that the ETS costs, so the carbon costs, are very important on the electricity price, and the indirect cost compensation has been very useful at this moment. So we ask it to prolong it also beyond 2030, because at the moment we only have visibility at 2030. And other elements like, for example, the CSAF, so the key industrial deal stated framework, is at the moment not compatible with the indirect cost compensation for the sectors that are subject to that. But in the end, it could be compatible, and two together could help further in reducing the carbon cost. Then we have all the dimensions related to the PPAs of oil free. We'll tackle it later in the panel. But it would be great for our smelters to sign PPAs, but at the moment the prices are too high. So you don't want to enter into a contract for a number of years with a price that is too high, because that's suicidal and it will not be effective. That's the reason why these contracts are not signed in a significant number at the moment. And the main elements of these high costs are regulatory costs, but also the firming shaping costs. Because inevitably you have intermittent renewable capacity that needs to meet a baseload need for the consumption. And so this cost needs to be de-risked with various tools that could be available. Like, for example, aggregation of the demands is one of the options. And this could be backed also by state aids, or to be that there was a system proposed by Greece that was rejected by DG PO. So it's also a matter of aligning the various DGs in the European Commission to to streamline these type of processes. So these are some of the ideas, some of the elements, but we can further discuss later.
Absolutely. Maybe just a follow-up question. You just mentioned base load, well, clean firm. To what extent it is essential to have for your industry clean firm wood a combination of different renewable sources key work out? You already mentioned a few specific.
But in the end, a smelter needs a firm supply, so it needs 24/7. And if you consider a few terawatt hours per year consumption, you can imagine on an hourly basis how much energy is needed. So regardless of where it comes from, was the better if it comes from a renewable source, a low carbon source. It can be nuclear, it can be wind, it can be solar, it can be a combination hydropower. But the important thing is that when it enters the plant is secured. So the stabilization and the firming should happen before the plants. The potential for flexibility for smelter is quite limited. It's possible to have interoperability schemes. For priority smelters, it's the case in some countries, but at the same time, while you can be disconnected from the grid within milliseconds, then you cannot be disconnected for more than a few hours. Otherwise, the smelter will the process will be disrupted in a permanent way. So, and this potential for being disconnected, therefore, releasing a huge capacity to the grid, it needs to be regulated properly, of course. So this is one of the ways that smelters can help. But at the same time, it disrupts the process because it's a continuous process. So whenever you interrupt it, you have some disruptions. So all this should be properly.
Absolutely. You mentioned carbon costs. Well, we all know that in the current rules, under the current rules, a carbon cost will increase, allowances will be tightened, will be decreased. Free allocation also will cease some point. So how do you see this trajectory? Because carbon costs, carbon pricing is a big discussion on top of all energy considerations these days.
So we are supportive of the ETS scheme. So we don't want to remove the ETS scheme because it has worked. But of course, the carbon leakage protection measures were introduced for a reason. And I was talking about the global competition. Now CBAM is supposed to replace the need for carbon leakage. And on that, we have some concerns, we have some proposals, we are discussing with policymakers. Because we want to be sure that when you lose the carbon leakage protection, then CBAM is as strong. Because if you have loopholes in that system, then of course you are without protection in a global competition. It's clear that in some segments of the value chain where you need to switch in order to decarbonize, for example, from natural gas to electrification or to hydrogen, whatever possible, is too expensive at the moment, then you need to stop the production. Then you need to install the new technologies so that you will lose revenues, so you have to invest. So CAPEX and OPEX supports are needed there. So industry is willing to do its part on these old assets. And as I said, already European production has a very low carbon footprint compared to the competitors. So in order to further decarbonize, because we are not there yet, then you need support.
Thanks a lot. I just want to ask panelists if you have immediate reactions to each other at this point. And if Tom, you would like to have a follow-up comments.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's good to note they're different, even from the different perspectives. The sense that we know what we're talking about. There aren't aspects that have been neglected or not being addressed. I hear all the comments about electricity market design and the way we don't want to disrupt anything. I think that's widely shared, not universally shared. We will see in the coming weeks how that political discussion evolves. But whatever the resolution of that discussion, what it has made clear is that certainly the Commission, perhaps all of us, are not very good at either doing what we said we would do, i.e. implementing. Because I tell a nice story of everything that's meant to happen. And in your different markets as well, as a sense, we could be doing this. We are preparing to do this. We're not doing it. And as a consequence, exacerbated by global events, we don't have the low prices that industry and households are crying out for. So it's reassuring to me that there aren't things for Mr. Our view, but it highlights the need to
literally get people around the table to work out why we're not moving faster.
Oh, I asked you on another occasion about the electricity market design. And, it's reassuring to hear that industries and stakeholders are also like very much in favor of the current architecture. But I asked you on another occasion what is or what should be the vital destination, because now first we had energy only markets, we got subsidies, we have capacity markets, now we work on flexibility. So how will it look like when we arrive at that point?
Yeah, my crystal ball, you mean? Well, we have such a high penetration of flexibility from all sorts of storage and very active widespread demand response, drawing on all distributed resources available to us, that mean that we have enough flexibility to cope with price spikes. We see no negative prices anymore. We see less volatile, lower average prices for electricity. That feeds through into longer term prices. So we see a growth of more affordable power purchase agreements. We see lower auction prices so that we have more affordable contracts for difference, which that has an immediate fiscal impact. So that's as it should be looking like. Ideally, that was already the vision, I would say, with the Clean Energy Package of 2019. So we should be there, but we're not. So that's one aspect of my vision, as well as the more integrated grid, member states delivering on the obligation to have the 70% interconnect capacity availability. Possibly that would mean that we could have more longer-term cross-border contractual arrangements, so greater integration on the grid side as well.
Yeah, I trust we will have a separate session on grid package. So as a panelist, I believe we'll discuss it in details. So it will be very useful. Any immediate reactions to this point?
Thank you. Yes, if I may, indeed on PPAs and flexibility that you mentioned, Tom. What I wanted to share, but first maybe coming back again to why we insist so much on the electricity market design and on the regulatory stability, is that the power sector will have to invest 5 trillion euros until 2050 into generation and infrastructure. 5 trillion euros. That is a lot of money. And for getting those investments really to happen, and all the utilities, I see colleagues here in the room, we are all absolutely committed to make this happen. But of course, for that, we need a reliable regulatory framework. That's actually why we insist so much on it. Because in the end, the biggest part of the answer on affordability is abundant, clean electricity. We need more of that. We need more of that generation, and we need more of infrastructure. And as you said, the grids package is another big topic. You will have a whole panel to discuss it, but that is, of course, a crucial bottleneck. And we are happy with the grids package to be launched and to be working on. There's a lot of discussions, of course, and then we are not a TSO, so I cannot take that perspective, but it's extremely important, the TENI part, but also the permitting part, obviously, that is crucial for us. And then so having those investments and how to get there and how to get this partnership with our clients. I think there's really a lot of good things happening. And you said, and I'm happy that you also perceive it like this, Tom. There's a lot of good things happening in corporate PPAs. This is moving. Last year, there has been a bit of less signing than in other years, but ultimately, this is a growing market. And we are extremely hard, working really extremely hard on it. And we have been even identified as number one globally in selling renewables corporate PPAs, something we are proud and happy about, but we know we need to do even more because we need innovative, tailor-made PPAs that can work exactly for Sandro, what you said. That is really tailor-made and corresponds to the needs. And there is a lot of innovation around. There's even a strong move towards 24/7 clean electricity, hourly matching, so really being 100% sure that that is exactly renewable if you want renewable, and at the same time making it firm, because we can combine different technologies and flexible assets, and then you can get that sort of PPA that you really need. So things are happening. What is also happening, but probably not a lot enough, is flexibility. And I just wanted to share one number that our colleagues came up with when we did our, we call it decarbonization pathway. It's like a scenario study looking towards 2050. Where are we in decarbonization? What is working? What is not working? Maybe just as a global outlook, we were actually quite confident to get to 2050 climate neutrality. But a lot needs to happen. We were super confident for 2030, and we still are, to get to the 55% climate reduction. 2050, confident because the technologies are there. Doubting because they are not there at the industrial scale that we need them. And then on flexibility, our colleagues calculated that demand-side flexibility is absolutely key. And the cost of decarbonization until 2050 will be 70% higher, 70, if we don't move towards more demand-side flexibility. So it's not for nothing that we speak about flexibility, and I think that is really something where we need to focus on grids, flexibility, and let the market do the rest.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Corinna. Helen, you want to?
Yeah, very shortly, maybe, because we're talking a lot about that existing market design and is it working and kind of what is ideal market design. I thought I brought an example which kind of shows that it works, but also what still needs to be done from the past week. And this is just a moment in time, right? Electricity prices are changing every day, as we know. But of course, in the past week was especially challenging for Europe, for energy markets. We saw in Germany, which is pretty dependent on gas, the price went up to, this is a front-month futures contracts, not the spot contracts. The prices in Germany went up to about 100 euros. In Italy, we're also very dependent on gas. It went to about 132. Whereas in Spain, on the same day, and in the same futures contract, same long-term vision, 32. So 132 or 32. And France, around 50. So for me, this is very clear. Okay, look what the integration of renewables can do. Look what the integration of renewables in long-term markets can do, because Spain is a very good example of this. But then also, again, we need more interconnections to make sure that Spain, Germany or Italy or any other country can also benefit from these lower prices. And then we're talking, there's a massive investment needs, obviously.
If I just may jump in. So you mentioned more interconnections. So I understand that long-term capacity allocation also remains an issue, long-term transmission rights. If this is an issue, and where it's not this part.
So long-term transmission rights are, for me, this is a bit a separate story from the markets that we operate, because long-term transmission rights, these are linked to the physical capacities on the borders. These are auctions. These are not secondary markets. This is not like split traded. Whereas what we're talking about are financial markets. Those are the markets for active risk management in the futures. Frankly, this has little to do with the physical border or the physical capacity in the long term, at least, because it's of course these physical bottlenecks and everything are taken into account in the pricing, but it's not limiting the amount of contract that can be signed. The contract that are signed on futures markets are a lot more than the physical capacity that's in between borders. So for me, those are two different things. where it's actually rather sometimes a worrying trend that these are coupled, these discussions, that these are seen as the same thing. There's sometimes LTTRs or moving them, changing them from zone to zone to hub and introducing a virtual hub will somehow help the financial risk management markets, which from our perspective is a very dangerous idea.
Very useful comment. Ellen, you wanted to mention something before you interrupt.
1 minute. Even shorter. There's massive investment needs, and we're talking a lot about the ETS and how the ETS is a problem. I think a problem is also partly a communication problem, because from our perspective, ETS is also a really big solution. Because there's revenues, there's billions of euros in there which can and should likely be better allocated to the industry or in a more targeted way. I just had a look until yesterday. Only in 2026, we've already gained 5.6 billion from the auctions. So that's a lot. By the end of the year, around 30, I don't know how much it's going to be, but that's a lot of money that we can and should be using in a smart way.
Thank you, Corinna.
Yes. Sorry, it's such an interesting discussion. I always have something that comes to mind, and fully support Ellen's point on ETS revenues. I think that is really an absolutely key debate that we need to have, and I trust that in the ETS review this will be pushed by the European Commission, that ETS revenues should not disappear somewhere in national budgets without any earmarking for decarbonization. It should go to, for example, energy-intensive industries so that they can decarbonize. So it's a wonderful tool, because you get the emission reduction for sure, and you can create revenues. And we are really looking also forward to the decarbonization bank that is announced. For that, we need also those 100 billion euros at least to come from the ETS revenues. So fully support that point. And then just very quickly on the transmission rights, it is an issue when you want to combine the financial and the physical world, because it prevents us from signing cross-border PPAs. Very simply, as I said, we are very committed to do more on PPAs, and cross-border would be fantastic, obviously, for the reasons that Ellen explained. But if a transmission right is granted for 1 year, we cannot sign a 5 or 10-year PPA. So and that could be something that could be fixed without a huge review of regulation. Tom is not agreeing, so I let you comment on that, Tom, but I think it should be part of the solutions we look at.
Tom, would you like to comment on it?
Just briefly on that, yes. It takes us back to one of the multiple discussions from the electricity market design. And we have the whole tension there in terms of how much of that scarce capacity can we dedicate to a long-term contract, and how much do we keep available for competition on the markets and the smooth functioning of the short-term market. And that's always a balance that we have to bear in mind. The more capacity we have, better. So certainly that's no brainer in terms of increasing available capacity. Quite how much we then lock up with the PPAs.
Can you give a number, approximate number?
Well, last time the discussion was between 3 years, and we ended up with 1 year. So that's the commitment we have at the moment. And obviously from the PPA perspective, 1 year is not enough. We need to explore if there are ways around that apart from simple pure allocation of capacity. Whether there are other ways we can interact the relationship between the physical and the financial PPAs. What kind of hybrid models are possible? I think there are things that we could be exploring there before we really jump on the issue of locking up capacity.
And how much time would it take approximately to explore it?
We can be as fast or as slow as we like. I'm happy to join discussions like this every day of the week.
Perfect. Corinna, coming back to you, you mentioned ETS again at carbon costs, and I cannot resist asking about such proposals by some member states, including Italy's recent ideas to compensate carbon costs in gas-fired generation. So how do you see this political component when, of course, we in the panel, we agree, and I understand that many in this room would support our discussion, but how would you foresee these political developments when member states may have a little bit different ideas?
Well, thanks for the question, Irina, because that is actually, I think, one of our biggest worries is that we actually get to market fragmentation by that kind of national interventions. That is, I will keep it a very, very, very general, not commenting too much on the mechanism itself, but it is a national intervention and something that that should be European. It will be, of course, I understand, looked at very closely also by DG Comp. And that is why we think we really need to get to those European solutions to prevent individual member states from intervening, and to prevent them from in the end undermining the fundamental mechanisms that we have in those markets. And we discussed abundantly about the electricity and the carbon market. So worried about that. And I think it's extremely important that we really also, again, and that's again a political statement, of course, also, but explicitly in this geopolitical context that we are in, we need to think European. We cannot answer those questions with national interventions, even though I fully understand that in every member state the situation is different, the energy mix is different, the solutions at hand are different. But I think really we need to resist to that pressure to answer with that kind of interventions on a national level, because fragmentation of the markets is the worst thing that we can do, because this internal energy market, I say it again, is probably our best asset. So let's not undermine it. Here, talk. You want to go?
Yes, just it highlights the point you've made already, that the political issue of high short-term prices is something that we've failed to convey the right messages. One of those messages that we're repeating now is all the tools that are already available to us to mitigate in the very short term these prices. If it hits the thresholds, we have a crisis framework in the electricity market side to correct the legislation. So when if prices were to skyrocket, then those mechanisms are known, they're clear, they're in law, and we can be using those. But in the meantime, whether we're looking at the ETS free allowances arrangements, the compensation arrangements, all the new elements that have come through in the CSAP, the transition state aid arrangements, where you call the 50-50-50 rule. So there are a lot of tools there that member states can already be using to mitigate, and that's within the broad single market framework. So that's from the Commission's perspective. Those tools should be well duly exhausted before we start looking for other wheezes, other attempts, some of which we've tried before. I mean, again, we're having people are recalling the Iberian example. And when we recall the Iberian example, we recall the increased gas consumption. It triggered the exports of cheap electricity to the neighboring countries that triggered, and the billions it cost the government. So we have to recall the downsides of these one-off national solutions, and try to make sure that the options we have at the European level are implemented to the full.
Very important comment, Sandro.
Yeah, just a remark on what Corinna said before about the ETS investment, so the ETS funds, and you mentioned that for your sector, the technology is already available and therefore it can be implemented. I just wanted to mention that for our sector, the decarbonization technologies are not available yet. So they need to be developed through R&D, through investments in innovation. So that money is even more important because it will ensure that 1 decade or 15 years, the technologies will be there, and therefore they will be able to deliver. So this is one dimension. The other point, I remember years ago when the indirect cost compensation was discussed in the reform of the EU ETS, we asked for an harmonization at European level, because this is important to have in terms of a European approach rather than a national approach. I know that's the legal aspects related to state aid and so on. But at the same time, it's not a coincidence that during the energy crisis, the smelters that closed were in countries that were not giving indirect cost compensation. So when the costs increased, smelters were not able to cope with these costs for the global competition that I mentioned and the selling price set by the London Metals Exchange. So this is an instrument that works, and together with the other instruments like the CSAF, for example, can really deliver in terms of safeguarding the sector and allowing it to invest for the future developmental technologies. So to be able to deliver a carbon-free production in a number of years.
Thank you, Sandro. Maybe coming back a bit to energy prices, we already touched upon like all these components. So are we speaking about like the expectation to lower the prices in the future, in the nearby future, in the midterm future, or we still, or perhaps we are trying to discuss when we will flatten the curve? So what is the level of energy, electricity prices we are expecting to be acceptable, affordable for us? And another point, like, are we talking a little bit about different, well, we all agree that we need greater market integration and convergence of prices, but still we have Nordics, we have the Iberian case, we have the case of like here, Northwest Europe, where like we have elevated levels usually. So are we talking a bit more like the problems about this region? Anyone who would like to comment?
I can pick it up to start with. It is, I mean, on the one hand, there are factors which should be driving down electricity prices, whether that's all the efficiencies in the system that I've been talking of, and fundamentally the penetration of low marginal costs renewables driving up higher priced gas. So that should be dampening prices. But we've all acknowledged as well the major investments that are needed across the board, and whether they're financed by the generators or tariffs or through other means, these are costs which also have to be financed, large often does not, from energy prices. So to commit to significant ongoing reductions in energy prices is probably something I would be cautious about. But certainly avoiding future price spikes and astronomically higher prices is something I would hope we could commit to. And then, sorry, the second part of your question was?
No, it was more about like we have still a bit different regional markets.
Yes, that's true as well. I mean, we've heard examples already this morning of major price disparities, and also the different mixes across member states. So a regional approach can very much be a way to tackle by supporting a greater consistency and harmonization, but taking into account regional variations. It's one reason we created the regional groups in the context of infrastructure planning and development. So we have the Southeast Europe group, we have the Western European group, Central European group, and the Northern Seas group, where we concentrate a lot on developing the offshore resources. So those kind of regional groupings are extremely useful to push for further cooperation, whether it comes to pre-development management or renewables projects development, but also just as a forum for sharing and understanding the differences and developing more standardized approaches.
Thank you, Tom. Any comments from the panel?
Yeah, I mean, as probably not the best to answer this question, because as an exchange, we don't comment on prices. And it's also absolutely not up to me to say what the price should be for the industry. I mean, it's up to them to decide the price, to determine what the supply and the demand looks like. But perhaps one thing which is a bit of an unpopular message sometimes is we're talking a lot about the integration of renewables and renewables determining more the price, which is absolutely the way we should go. But that also means that the future of European electricity markets is volatile by nature, because electricity prices are intermittent, they are more changing, but that's not necessarily a problem if, as Corinna already highlighted, we have the right response to this. We have demand response, we have flexibility. So I think a lot about we don't have to be scared of volatility of the price levels or changes that renewables bring. No, it just creates demand for new solutions as well, which can be integrated to flatten off these prices. There's one example is as AX, we're working on quite some different products, because now and we expect that will continue, but our products, the most liquid ones, those are base products, right? Base load products into the future. We're now working on new products to accommodate the entrance of battery operators and other flexibility providers into the shorter markets, but then also so that they are able to kind of optimize their revenue and their dispatching in the long term. So we're working, for example, on TB2 products, which is top to bottom, and which is the hedging instrument for battery producers, which is simply said the price difference between the highest level of the day and the lowest level, and that price difference is something they can hedge, which means they can optimize their revenues and they can make dispatch decisions and also be more secure in their investment decisions in the future. So we are working on things like this. So that will be part of the solution. Of course, that should be talked about in addition to demand response and everything like this.
Thanks a lot. Any comments, Sandro?
No, I would just say that, I mean, of course, as an association, we also cannot comment on prices, but at the same time, aluminium is also considered as an energy bag. So all the energy you put into the product is endlessly available through the recycling routes. So it's crucial that this competitiveness of the sector, which is based on the electricity prices, taken care of. And being identified as a critical sector and strategic sector for Europe means that we need to make some tailor-made solutions for this sector, and the electricity prices something that is the crucial part of the competitiveness, so to say.
Well, electricity price will be inevitably volatile, but it's good for you to have some predictability.
Yeah, the risk, limit the uncertainty somehow.
Very good. Tom, Corinna.
Sorry, just before my colleagues kill me, I should mention energy efficiency. And that really should be part of the discussion on prices, because it's all very well to see the headline price, but the high prices of Europe have generated an industry multiple industries which are amongst the most energy efficient in the world. And that's an ongoing price signal which is sensitive to, but we should recollect that if we have double the prices and 50% of the energy consumption, then we are competing fairly with the rest of the world.
Well noted.
Of course, if you have 40% of the production cost on electricity, you are dead on energy efficiency. There's no more margins for that.
Oh, yeah, understand. Of course, Sandro, from your point of view, but of course, it should be part of the debate. Fully agree with that. And of course, also, I will not comment on prices, and I also don't have a crystal ball, or is sort of not functioning very well always. But maybe looking just at the last few years, and that is also, I think, an important point in the political debate, that we distinguish very clearly between wholesale prices and end user prices. And if you look at the wholesale price, you see that in many, if not most, European countries, the electricity price has gone down in the last few years. And that is the countries that have a decarbonized electricity system. So you see that it is actually bringing prices down. Of course, you have other elements, and of course, we have this huge challenge of grid modernization, grid build-outs that has to be financed, obviously. So no promises at all, but just at the wholesale level, it's again the key element is really clean, homegrown electricity. We have to have more of that, and that must always be the first answer. And again, to make those investments happen, we need the stability. And then indeed comparing we always hear this comparison between the US, but also there the picture is super nuanced. Huh? You have I think in Texas you have exactly the same price than here. So it's and if they are lower overall for the US, that has always been the case, and I think so. It's we never discussed this so much because it also doesn't help because we don't have fossil fuels here. So we have other solutions, and we can go for this clean electrification, and we should do it. And for the rest, we need to decarbonize molecules, and that we also will do. So I think we still have to have some confidence in our own strengths, and that will also. I'm confident in this downward trajectory ultimately of prices.
Very good point, Corinna. We have 10 minutes before the end of this session. You wanted to comment? No. We have 10 minutes before the end of the session, and I'm just wondering if the audience has any comments or questions that you would like to raise. I see one hand. Any other questions, comments? Yeah, another one. Okay, so please introduce yourself.
Larry Moffat with the Press Club, Brussels, Europe. I understand that you're calling for ETS revenues to be redirected to industry. That would mean basically taking it away from the Social Climate Fund. At the same time, the energy industry is accused by some parties, including an influential voice at the European Commission I heard recently, of rent-seeking due to the marginal pricing of energy. So my question is, if the pricing were more based on the average cost, would that make it more affordable for end users and less this volatile? Thank you.
Who would like to become this?
Maybe I can say something about the first part of the question. I mean, at least from our perspective, using the revenues of the ETS that we currently have does not negate the Social Climate Fund's revenues or the need for a Social Climate Fund at all. Let that be clear. I think the revenues that we're talking about are also mostly ETS 1. Of course, ETS 2, once it starts, is going to be a whole other potential for revenues, which can be used for the decarbonization of the sectors there, or can be debated for the industry as well. But of course, the Social Climate Fund is part of this, because you cannot do a transition, especially at the speed that we need it to happen, without the acceptance of the wider public. So of course, I mean, for me, those are things that have to go hand in hand, but it's also kind of a separate revenue pool.
Okay, good. Any other comments?
Well, no, just to agree. Indeed, I think there is not necessarily a trade-off. You know, you need to keep the Social Climate Fund. I'm convinced about that. But again, as I said earlier, there's a lot in national budgets, and in some member states it's used for decarbonizing industries, but in many it's not. So I'm more thinking about that part of the revenues, to be honest. And then on the merit order, we are really convinced, and as Tom said earlier, it's sort of universal that the marginal pricing based on the merit order is the most efficient way. It's also the most transparent way, the most competitive way. And if another system would help at some point in time industry, I don't know, but it would not help the overall consumers in Europe. So, you know, you would not end up with overall lower prices. You would just make it less transparent, less competitive, less efficient. It can have a positive impact, again, at some point in time, because we're also speaking about spot situations ultimately. But overall, it's we don't know let me say it like this, we don't know any more efficient way of the market to function.